Hello, hello. It's Elizabeth Busby here, the Director of Programs for the Theology of the Body Institute. Today, we are going to be talking about how to break up with someone when you've decided you're done with a relationship. This is an awkward topic, I'm not gonna lie. But I think that I owe it to all of you if I sit here talking about relationships and breakups and how to process them and how valuable they are, that it's worth a conversation. To those of you who have discerned that it's not God's will to stay in the relationship, or that you don't want to stay in the relationship and you want to get out of it. I see a lot of horrible ways that people try to get out of relationships, frankly. And so I thought I would throw my 2 cents into the conversation and give you some tips for how to end a relationship in a way that upholds the other person's dignity. I want to start by kind of backing up a little bit and talking about getting into a relationship. When you are thinking about, am I ready to be in a relationship? One of the things that I think is important to consider is, do I have the courage to break up with someone if I need to? Am I brave enough to end a relationship, right? We do not live in a culture that fosters courage. We just don't. If you lived at the time of William Wallace with all of the Scottish, brave, hardy warrior people where everyone was prepping to go fight for freedom, the culture fostered bravery, right? It was trying to help you become a courageous person. The culture that we live in today doesn't foster really courage of any kind. There's not a lot of focus on virtue development. There's not a lot of focus on how do you be brave and how do you do hard things. And there are segments of the population that do that. But as a whole, that's not necessarily what we're going for in child rearing today. So lots of people grow up and just aren't very brave. They don't have a lot of courage, particularly relationship courage, right? And so I think that if you're not in a place where you could have that hard conversation, if the relationship ends up not working out, I don't think you should be in a relationship in the first place. I think you need to spend some time growing in virtue, getting stronger in your convictions, getting stronger in your boundaries, learning how to have healthy conversations with people even when they're hard, not running from tough conversations. I mean, in your day-to-day, I'm sure you have lots of opportunities for tough conversations at work, with your bosses, with your family members, etc., with the person who cut you off on your commute, the way you think about them in your head, what you would say to them if you could talk to them in person, those sorts of things. You have opportunities for seizing courage and having good, healthy, appropriate conversations about hard topics. So I would say spend some time focusing on that, because the reality of a relationship is it's either going to end in one of 2 ways. When you are in a commitment with someone, when you're boyfriend, girlfriend, when you're discerning marriage, it's either going to end in a breakup or it's going to end at the altar. There's no other option. Once you're in a commitment, you either end it in a breakup or you get married. And I think most people obviously go into relationships assuming they're going to get married otherwise, or deeply hoping they're going to get married otherwise, why do it in the first place? But the reality is, in order to have disinterested discernment, in order to actually be seeking the will of God and actually be trying to figure out if this person is a good fit for you, you have to hold in your brain the possibility that the answer is going to be no. Right? Otherwise, that's not a free discernment if you're forcing the answer to be yes. So you have to be able and aware of the fact that you may be having a tough conversation. And if you can't do that, if you're not in a place to do that, I don't think that you should be in a relationship yet. I don't think you have the maturity yet. I think you need to spend some time growing in maturity, growing in courage, growing in communication, growing in boundaries, growing in bravery to have hard conversations. And from there, you'll be able to have a necessary skill in a good, holy relationship. And then if you end up dating them and you get married, you can use that skill elsewhere. Trust me, in parenting, there's lots of opportunities for hard conversations and boundary setting. You can have great chances to use those skills in the future. So having framed that, the reality is lots of you are watching this video because you're at a point where you're ready to break up with someone, right? You've discerned that the relationship is over and you're trying to figure out how to get out of it. And I want to start by saying that you are in a very hard position. This is a hard thing to do, right? In all likelihood, there's a piece of you that's even sad about it, right? You might be ready to get out of the relationship, but that doesn't mean you're happy about getting out of the relationship. Maybe you are happy. Maybe it's stale and you're ready to go. But there's still probably a piece of you that doesn't want to hurt your beloved, right? That there's that there's pain knowing that they're going to suffer. So I just want to call it like it is. Like, this is a hard thing to do. And I'm proud of you for watching this video, and I'm grateful you're watching this video, and I'm so glad that you care enough for them and about them that you're spending the time and energy to educate yourself on how to do it. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is I want you to gather all of your courage, every ounce of courage you possibly gleaned from your upbringing, and don't ghost them. Make sure that you have a conversation, right? Take all your courage and ask them to meet you somewhere. And make sure that it is a public enough place. If you want it to be a public place, that it's public enough that there's space, right? You don't necessarily want to be doing it in like a crowded place with lots of other people. But you may not want to be doing it like one-on-one in someone's apartment, but just make sure that you're asking that person to go somewhere. You don't have to obviously tell them you're breaking up. Just be like, we need to chat. Can we have a meetup somewhere, right? Gather all your courage and have the conversation, because I see a lot of times people just shirking from the hard thing. And perhaps you've never been taught how to do really hard things. You know, you didn't have the support to learn how to muster your courage and whatever. We don't really live in a culture that fosters a lot of courage nowadays. And so it's possible that you've never had to do something this hard. But I know you have courage in you. I know that it's buried deep down in there. I know you have it. So find it and ask them to meet in person, because an in-person conversation is going to uphold their dignity in the best possible way. If you're long distance, you could totally use FaceTime or something, but don't do it on a phone call. Don't do it over text. And please, please, don't do nothing. Don't just like stop talking to them and do nothing. Okay. So when you're there and you're trying to communicate with your significant other about why the relationship is ending, please do not blame it on God. You have a reason why you're breaking up with them, right? And it can seem like it will soften the blow by not telling them the reason, but by saying something like, God told me to end this relationship. God told me he doesn't want me in this anymore. It's God's will that this relationship ends. It's a little outside the scope of this video to go into free will and to go into authentic discernment, etc. But the reality is that God honors your free will, right? If you are making a choice between a good and a bad, obviously God's will is that you choose the good, right? If the option is pay for the candy or steal it, there's really only one option, and God's will for you is to pay for the candy, right? He doesn't want you to steal. But if you're trying to decide, abuse aside, if the relationship is abusive, that's different. Get out of the relationship, please. It upholds everyone's dignity to get out of it. But for the vast majority of you who are not in abusive relationships, to choose to marry this person or to choose to not marry this person are two good things. You could be made holy by either choice, and God is the vast majority of the time, God is going to let you choose what you want to do, and he will honor and bless the choice that you made. There may be a choice that is a better fit for a number of reasons, and those number of reasons are probably why you're ending the relationship. But those are the reasons you need to focus on, because to say that it's God's will is presumptuous, for one. That is your interpretation of God's will, and perhaps the other person on the receiving end disagrees and thinks that God's will is that you stay in the relationship, right? Perhaps the other person has been told, maybe even with the guidance of a spiritual director or something, that you're a good fit for them and they want to discern marriage with you, right? To pit God in the middle of it, to pit that person against God's will, it's just not. I truly think that you may have the best intention in saying that, but it is not a helpful thing to do. And I would strongly encourage you to not do it. Please. What you need to say, is what your reason is. So you don't have to, you have one, or you wouldn't be ending the relationship, right? And it may be something like, I just don't want to do this anymore. It may not necessarily have something to do with them as a person. It may genuinely have to do with you as a person. I know that's cheesy line, like, it's not you, it's me. It might be true, but you need to don't say it's not you, it's me. You could say, I just don't want to be in this relationship anymore, and it sounds harsh and it sounds painful, but the alternative, which is lying or blaming it on God or doing nothing, those are much more cruel, right? The truth Jesus is the truth. We know that, right? He's the way, the truth, and the life. So if you tell the truth, you bring Jesus into this conversation, into this very difficult, painful place that your former beloved is now about to enter into, right? So just tell the truth, even if it's hard. You don't have to elaborate. You don't have to like go into all of the conversations you had with your mom and your best friend and your whoever to like come to this conclusion. Just tell them. Just tell them how it is. And then I will always suggest closing a breakup conversation with what's going to happen now. When you have a clean break, the break will heal better. If you think about a broken bone, when you have a clean break, the break often heals better than a break that's jagged and awful and requires surgery and screws and all this stuff. And maybe it's like never actually the same as it was before. So if you're going to break up, I highly recommend a clean break. It is harder. It is more painful to have a clean break, but I highly recommend one. So at the end of the breakup conversation, say, and now I think it's best that we don't communicate at all anymore. Perhaps for a set amount of time, and I can get more into this in another video, but perhaps for a set amount of time. But and you could say how much time you want that to be and when you want to have that conversation. But to leave it open-ended when you end the conversation and there's no discussion of what's going to happen now, you guys have probably formed a lot of patterns around talking to each other, right? You probably text at certain times of the day. You probably have phone calls at certain times of the day. You probably hang out with each other at certain times of the week or whatever. All of that's gone now. And it's going to feel very normal and natural to just keep doing what you've been doing because that's what humans do. They like to do what they've been doing and it's comfortable and easy. So if you don't put a boundary around what's going to happen now, it's going to be very easy to fall back into just communicating. And then you may easily fall into this awkward middle ground of we're not in a commitment. I'm hurting. I'm in a lot of pain from your significant other. Maybe you are hurting. Maybe you're ready to move on. Either way, you may find yourself in this awkward gray area where you're not in a commitment, but you're still talking and you're trying to figure out how to be friends. And if you want to be friends, then it gets messy. And that's a conversation for another time, which I will have. I will make another video and talk about that. But what you need to know for this breakup conversation is say what's going to happen now. So I think it's best if we don't talk to each other, if we don't text, if we don't message on social media for the next 40 days, whatever you want to do, 2 weeks, wherever you are right now, however you want to be it, but just tell them what's going to happen now. And then make sure you follow through on that, right? So you, like in most relationships, the couple has become not only, their romantic interest, but also like their best friend. And so when you end the relationship, you're losing not only that significant other and the hope and potential for the future, but you're losing the best friend also. And so there will likely be some time of adjustment to figure out, what do I do now? Who do I talk to now? Who do I process these things with? Etc. And if you don't have a clear boundary at the end of the conversation, it's very easy to stumble back into, it's just you, my comfortable person that we talk to. Does that make sense? So the last thing that I want to say here is I want you to be thinking about where the person's heart is. So you are sitting here ready to break up. And that means that you have been processing the relationship ending for some amount of time, right? Maybe as long as months. Maybe it's been months that you've been like, I don't actually know if this is the right thing. Maybe it's been weeks, days, whatever. Hopefully not hours. Give it a little more thought if it's been hours. But there's been some amount of time where you've already started processing the relationship ending, and you've processed the future, you've processed what life would look like. All of that probably weighed into your decision and your discernment of what to do next. Your partner has had probably none of that time. Maybe there's been some awkwardness in the last few days or weeks and they're like getting suspicious, but they probably, most of the time, have not started the process of processing the relationship ending, thinking about the future, etc. So they're in a very different place from you because what you've been doing for weeks now, presumably, they're starting now, right? So I just want to frame that for you because a lot of people going through breakups aren't thinking about that. They're not thinking about it from that regard. Your pain is going to be a lot different than their pain because you've been grieving up until now and they don't start grieving until now. Does that make sense? So even if probably this conversation, as hard as it is to say and as hard as it is to hear for the person on the receiving end, this conversation is probably going to come as a bit of a relief to you because you've been thinking about it and prepping about it and stressing about it and angsting about it, watching YouTube videos about it. And when it's over, you're like, okay, Okay, we did it. I can do hard things and I'm moving on. But that person, it's going to be the opposite of a relief. It's going to be agonizing and painful and awful. And if you can think about where their heart is, it will help inform how you behave and how you hold yourself and carry yourself in the weeks to come as this person is processing the pain and you're just kind of in a state of relief that the hard conversation is over. Does that make sense? So, in summary, you're brave. I'm proud of you for watching this video. I'm proud of you for figuring out how to uphold the dignity of the person that you once loved and maybe still love in some capacity, but know you're not called to marry. Good job. Thank you for watching. And I'll be praying for you as you prep for this conversation. I'll be praying for the heart of your beloved as you prep, or former beloved, as you prep for this conversation. Just keep where their heart is in mind, and make sure that you're brave and gentle and clear in how you communicate and in your boundaries. That is the most charitable thing you can do, is be intentional and clear in what you're saying. So if you liked this video, or if you hated this video but it was still helpful for you, go ahead and subscribe, share it with anyone that you think would benefit from this. Kind of takes on a new bent when I'm talking to people who are about to go through breakups. So maybe subtly share it with your friends. I don't know how you want to handle it. Handle yourself, but make sure that you subscribe. And yeah, until next time, let's pray for each other. I will definitely be praying for you, especially all you people watching this video who are discerning breakups and all of the people on the receiving end of my advice in this video. Please pray for me. Bye.